Welcome to the Daily Agenda. Tonight's podcast is about how to clean up nationalism and the reason why it needs to be cleaned up. We're going to focus on Nick Fuentes. It was very interesting because it had this, how could I put it, hugely popular interview with Tucker Carlson. And in that interview, it came across quite clearly that this was a person of no real significance at all. I sat there watching it thinking, how did this man rise to prominence? Oh, yes, of course, it's the Groiper mentality, isn't it? Quite frankly, and the loss of culture. And when confronted with this loss of culture, what they do is they respond to it with Christian fundamentalism. And in the video you're about to see with Fuentes, from several years ago, he is ranting and raving about pagans and that we need to drive pagans out of nationalism and that's his only purpose. As I said, this guy's a Fed. He was sent in basically to divide nationalism, not to unite nationalism, because the simple truth is, the majority of nationalists are not Christian fundamentalists. So how can a minority of crackpots drive us out of nationalism? And that's the way it is here in Britain, for certain. In the United States, I know that there are at least a couple of million American pagans, white American pagans, who would be involved in nationalist politics, but not while all these Christian fundamentalists are involved in it. Absolutely not. They just don't want anything to do with them. And so that is a great loss, in actual fact, there to the movement. And so the establishment there is throwing everything it can at the likes of Charlie Kirk. Oh, he's dead. Spoke out of turn, apparently, according to most people, but he's dead. Anyway, and now they've got Nick Fuentes, it would seem, as his little shoo-in. So the Tucker Carlson show and the invite to it appeared to me like an invitation to become the replacement for Charlie Kirk. I think Nick Fuentes is going to suffer exactly the same fate and probably won't be too long. He's already had one assassination attempt, and it's hardly surprising, is it, when he's advocating mass murder, as you'll see in a clip later. So let's concentrate on what Fuentes has to say in this clip, because he admits he's here, that he's been sent in to divide nationalists and to drive out all the pagans who were the backbone of nationalism for decades. So let's take a good look.
Dividing us. Nick, you're subversive. Nick. Oh, this guy, this Mexican is dividing the movement. He's a subversive. He's this, he's that. Damn right. We are dividing the pagans right out. If you're a pagan in the year of our Lord, 2018, you're too stupid. You're too heretical to be in the movement. And so I will gladly divide you right out. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how pro-white you are. Out. We don't need heretics in this movement. We are fighting a spiritual warfare against demons, against Satan. And we don't need these LARPing people with their sacrifices and their tattoos and their goofy symbology. We don't need them. We don't need you. They post this meme where it's like a crusader and a Viking. And the Viking's like, together? Because they're confronting the postmodern world. And the Christian's like, together. Fat chance. Fat chance. We don't need you. We need to fight you too. You're with them. You're with the atheists. You're with the degenerates. So, and what's funny to me? They always say, this is what they always say. They always say like, oh, well, the Catholic Church, they say the Catholic Church rapes little boys. Yeah, in paganism, that's not even a bad thing. In paganism, raping a little boy is called pederasty, and it's encouraged, it's embraced in every pagan culture. So they're like, child abuse in 2018. What's the problem, pagan? That's your whole deal. You can't even, why is that a bad thing, pagans? For us, at the very least, when a Catholic does that kind of thing, we say, that's a sin, you're going to hell. When a pagan sees that, they have to give him a pat on the back and say, good job.
Now, a friend of mine posted this clip this morning on my Facebook timeline in response to an obnoxious creature called Chris Mitchell, who calls himself the Brummie Traveller. And I actually posted it back to him and said, look, if you support Fuentes, then you support the mass murder of pagans. And I'm a pagan, and you claim that you want to be close to me. Crikey, scary stuff, isn't it? And get involved in my movement. Absolutely not. I will not have any such person around me in any way, shape or form. They simply cannot be trusted. I mean, after all, they've only got mass murder on their mind, haven't they? And they want to drive out all the pagans. You must know that this type of crackpottery is totally acceptable in the United States, where Christian evangelism and Christian crackpotism of every possible description is rampant. Here in Britain, it scares the shit out of people. Nobody wants to know about it, and they run from it a million miles. And that's what I've said about all the Christian nationalist groups here in this country who've tried the Christian nationalism routine and failed in spectacular fashion. We've got Nick Griffin, who wrecked the BNP. Part of the reason he wrecked it was Christian nationalism, grifting through Christian nationalism, concentrating on hate preachers out, whilst behaving like a hate preacher himself. He's now with the plastic Templars reborn, and apparently they've risen from the grave like their beloved Jesus, and they're walking around in their silly capes with their plastic swords pretending to be Templars, these fat, over-the-hill men who've done more grifting than anything else in nationalism. That's the only thing they've ever succeeded at, in my opinion. Grifting and spouting absolute crap about Christian fundamentalism. So Nick Fuentes, in truth, should have no influence here whatsoever. But that's not the case, is it? Because we have someone like the Brummie Traveller, Chris Mitchell. Now, in truth, Chris Mitchell is a muckraker, a shit-starer, and an outright snake. He invited me onto his show, if you can call it that. It's got like 400 or 500 followers, is it, on his YouTube channel? There's nothing particularly impressive about it. Very low view count. And he invited me onto his show because he wanted me to boost his viewing figures, obviously, and subscribers, when I refused to do it. Mainly because I can't stand the man. I only spoke to him once on Facebook Messenger, took an instant deep dislike to the man, and having looked at his photographs and body language, I thought, yeah, absolutely, snake, arrogant, contemptuous snake on a warpath to cause trouble with everyone he encounters, and that's exactly what he's doing. You see, and another thing that Mitchell is doing is he apparently spends more time with the Sifnats, the centre-right, our enemy, and then sends me messages telling me how wonderful they are and that they should be given an opportunity. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. This is the man who allowed Glenn Saffer to dox him and his elderly mother and did nothing about it. Yeah, that's what I call real cowardice. Speaking of cowardice, he actually sent me a message because I refused to speak to them. I despise the man and I had no intention of speaking to him and told him so. And so he sent me a message, a voice note, very brave indeed, so courageous. He was in the pub with his mates. You could hear the pub in the background. Called me a coward and a bitch. He probably thought really, he was really brave and hard and tough, etc. Stood there at the bar with his mung mates, basically. Yeah, I told that Simon Tomlin straight I did. From a safe distance over the telephone, that is. Don't mention that one, will you? But what he was really looking for, was to provoke a nasty response from me. See, what he had in mind, he thought, I'll tell him this in this voice note. He'll pick it up and he'll be so angry, he'll leave me a voice note, and then I can use this voice note against it and put it on my YouTube channel and drive up my viewing figures and my subscribers and portray Simon in a really bad light. Not including the voice note he sent me in the first place, obviously. See, that's what these snakes do. They're just snakes out to cause trouble. Chris Mitchell, he's a Sifnat. End of. This is another very important point. Across social media in the last 72 hours, since the Tucker Carlson interview, it is rampant, i.e. Nick Fuentes is a Sifnat. He's not a nationalist, definitely not a white nationalist, he's a Sifnat. And we saw him there in glorious Technicolor, didn't we, on the Tucker Carlson show, proving the fact that he is just another Sifnat, and his mission is to cause division and chaos, to sow the seeds of chaos and division within nationalism. This is the time now to drive him out. Now, let's have a look what he really wants, what this little Fed was sent in to do. This should disturb any moderate Christian, in actual fact, if there's such a thing. I'm sure there is. I've met a few. But it does seem to me that in the ranks of nationalism, in the right wing, nearly all of them are cranks and crackpots and fundamentalists. But anyway, let's have a look at Fuentes here saying that pagans should be executed for being pagans, apparently. Work that one out if you can.
Is an occult element at the high levels of society, and specifically among the Jews. So many of the people that are perpetrating the lies and the destruction on the country, they are evildoers. They are people that worship false gods. They are people that practice magic or rituals or whatever. And more than anything, those people need to be, when we take power, they need to be given the death penalty. Straight up. And I'm far more concerned about that than I am about even non-white people or mass migration. These people that are communing with demons and engaging in this sort of witchcraft and stuff, and these people that are suppressing the name Christ and suppressing Christianity, they must be absolutely annihilated when we take power. This is God's country. This is Jesus' country. This is not the domain of atheists or devil worshippers.
So, as I'm sure you saw there in that clip, a dangerously demented and unstable young man. Well, I say young man. In the Tucker Carlson interview, we saw there about 40% of the time in Nick Fuentes' performance, an incredibly immature, childish young man who's barely even reached the threshold of manhood, quite frankly. I sat there and thought to myself, it must be an irksome experience for Tucker tolerating this. But obviously he does, because he's also another Christian. Is he a Christian fundamentalist? Well, push comes to shove, I think he probably would be. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the case with most Christians, isn't it? Push comes to shove, they'll go with the fundamentalists because they're sheep following the shepherd. And so this is my point about nationalism. What has caused the ruination of nationalism in this country? I'll tell you, yeah? In the modern context, that is, following on from the last few years of utter collapse and failure and faction fighting. In essence, since Griffin got kicked out of the BNP and was replaced by a pair of criminals who raped it for millions of pounds in wills. And we'll go into that in another video, because they're both going to be exposed. Adam Walker, absolutely, and Clive Jefferson. Their organised crime is going to be exposed completely. So that's something they've got to look forward to. And of course, they'll do a lot of sabre rattling about it as well. But they've heard it all before, seen it all before, and it's all very boring, Mr. Walker, Mr. Jefferson. So don't even bother. And some cripple, crikey, honestly, come on, get real. You may well have been a big man at one time and a cocaine importer, Jefferson, but you don't bother me in the slightest. And neither does Walker and his martial arts dojo, which apparently is his Achilles heel. But anyway, we'll save that one for a later date. Yes, of course, because they're going to be ousted from the British National Party. That is our agenda. It is my daily agenda, in actual fact. I'm working towards achieving it every single day. And I won't be achieving it with the likes of Chris Mitchell or any of the people I'm about to outline right now. So, what happened in nationalism? The organised criminal gang, the likes of Clive Jefferson, Nick Griffin and Adam Walker, need to be driven out of nationalism completely into some confine, some crank faction, basically, where they can attract all the other cranks and we can just keep them there, basically, like a contagion. Isolate them as a contagion. It's perfectly accepted to us. That's no problem at all. We'll never have anything to do with them. And that, first and foremost, financially, is the reason why nationalism is in tatters. And it is in tatters, being no doubt about it. The second reason is rabid Christian fundamentalism. You can get away with that shit in the United States. You probably get away with that shit elsewhere in the world. But here in Britain, we don't do God in British politics. Anyone who hasn't learned that yet will just end up like Nick Tenconi, David Koresh II. Although, having said that, I think probably Nick Fuentes has earned the title of Koresh II, hasn't he? It's a close contest. I mean, they both do a great deal of ranting, but when it comes to the crunch, they both run like the clappers. I mean, just look at Fuentes. I mean, goodness me, he couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. And he sits there talking the biggest pile of crap about you know, all this tough guy talk and execute this and execute that. Well, it takes force to drag people off the execution. How is Fuentes and his little homoerotic groypers going to achieve that? They're not, are they? And this brings me to the other issue of some of the people that actually admire and respect these groypers. The Zoomers. That's right, the Zoomers. Asocial brats who behave like they're in a kindergarten. And the reason why they're so toxic in nationalism, yet they think they're so indispensable, they're not. They've achieved absolutely nothing at all in nationalism other than splitting from one faction into another faction, into another faction, into another faction, and into another faction. The prediction I made just a few weeks ago about the faction that followed Steve Law's How to the Homeland Party and how that faction would split within just a few weeks came true. They've all split. They've all turned against each other. Just as I predicted. It always happens with these Zoomers. They're just irresponsible little brats who haven't grown up. So we can't build a nationalist movement with irresponsible brat-like Zoomers who've got antisocial behaviour problems. And the reason why they have these problems, that they have a problem with authority and people who know far better than what they do, is because they've come from an absolute garbage education system with zero discipline, no respect for authority, no respect for their elders, and they just think they can behave like this in nationalism. Well, they won't behave like that around me, because the way I run organisations is like a regimental sergeant major. And believe me, no Zoomer is going to like the way I run an organisation, because I do it with discipline, and everyone behaves respectfully and decently. You know, there's none of this mob, thuggish, moronic behaviour. I won't tolerate it, because that's another reason why nationalism has failed, because of the amount of clowns who've been allowed to join it. And, you know, I guess there is another issue as well, is the Nat Socks and the Hitler Simps and the Mosleyites. You know, we don't want any of these people. All of these people must be regarded as a contagion. Okay? Wrap it into a little bundle and send them all off into one corner. I would say Nick Griffin should lead them, with Jada Franson and Jim Dowson. They would be perfect for one another. But there'd be a bit of a squabble, obviously, over who'd have to be the Führer between, you know, Griffin and Alex Yerbury. Although I feel sure if Griffin actually promised Yerbury that he'd be the replacement Führer, then Yerbury would be perfectly okay with that, and he'd be prepared to serve as his understudy. Do you get the point I'm making? All the toxicity needs to go. They are a contagion, okay? I know, because I speak to the vast majority of nationalists who do not think like this, they do not behave like this, they do not operate like this, that they are absolutely sick and tired of these contagious people, and they want them all kicked out. And that's exactly what I'm here to do. To expel them and ostracise them and isolate them in a bubble like a dangerous contagion, because that's exactly what they are. The moment you allow that contagion to enter into your ranks, your organisation will be destroyed forever, completely. And in truth, Nick Fuentes admitted in that video clip there that, you know, he is an agent of division. He is a Fed. I mean, it was funny, the scene where Carlton said, "I thought you were a Fed." And he said, "I thought you were a Fed." Yeah, absolutely right. I think they're both Feds, quite frankly. I don't trust any of these people. Not one of them. You know, Tucker Carlson comes out of the American establishment. Okay, he's a Christian fundamentalist, really, in truth, but he's not a Zionist. The same is also true with Fuentes, although his views on that show with Tucker were lame and tame, and also his performance on that show was very similar to Tommy Robinson's submission role in Israel over the last few days. So it's done us a great deal of good. Here we've had Tommy causing himself massive damage in Britain, and over there in Yankee Land we've had this silly little boy Fuentes who's about to meet his, how could I put it, his fateful opportunity with a pair of crosshairs, I would say, quite frankly, because no one can carry on inciting mass murder in the way that he's doing and live for very long. The whole of history proves that such people do get taken out. I'm not saying that it should be. I'm simply saying that that is what happens, you know. And so we've seen there the extent to which these agents of division, and particularly Fuentes, has stuck his tentacles into some of the people in British nationalism here and cause fractions and divisions here. A fractious divide like we saw today with Chris Mitchell. Although that snake just used it as an example because he was looking for an argument. Because he thinks, he's another one who thinks he's some sort of argument. Couldn't fight his way out of a wet bag. You know, he's capable of doing one thing only. Leaving a voicemail on a smartphone in a pub, giving it the big un, in it, bruv, you know, with all his mungy mates around him. Yeah, coward, bitch. Yeah, you will never speak to me like that to my face. Absolutely guarantee you. You and no one else on the face of this earth, Mitchell. Absolutely not. But we've seen here again quite clearly, these people, we don't have to go out and find them. They simply flush themselves out of the woodwork. And whenever they do so, they get expelled, they get ostracised, they get put into contagion corner where they stay forever. And that is the first and best step to rescue British nationalism and put it back on a track to where we can actually emulate the British National Party and win more than 1 million votes, 2 million votes, 3 million votes. Anybody who believes it can't be done is living in cloud cuckoo land. It can be done. We simply have to do it in exactly the right way. And to make it happen, we have to get rid of contagion corner and put it in a different corner, as far away from us as possible. Thank you for tuning in to the Daily Agenda. Take care. See you soon.